On November 11, 1912, in West Virginia, a boy was born with no ears. Not small ears, not deformed ears. Nothing. No lobes, no openings, no canals on either side of his head. The doctor who delivered him eventually admitted to the father what everyone in the room already knew. The child would be deaf and mute for the rest of his life. The father did not accept it. Not in a heroic movie way, in a stubborn, borderline delusional way. He decided, in the room, that his son would hear, and then he spent years acting as though the decision had already taken effect. He talked to the boy constantly. He told him bedtime stories every night, to a child who by every medical account could not hear a word of them. And he told him something that sounds almost cruel written down, that having no ears was an advantage, that teachers would give him more attention, that people would go out of their way for him, and that this was a gift the other children did not get. The boy grew up believing it, because nobody ever told him otherwise. When he was about 7, he wanted to sell newspapers like the older boys. His mother said absolutely not, because he could not hear traffic. So he climbed out the kitchen window, borrowed 6 cents from a neighborhood businessman, bought newspapers, sold them, bought more, and came home having cleared 42 cents. And somewhere in there, the family realized he was picking up sound. Not through ears he did not have, through bone, through the side of his skull, through something nobody could fully explain. By the time he was in school, he had somewhere around 65% of normal hearing, and he could speak. The boy's name was Blair. His father was named Napoleon Hill, and 25 years later, Hill would put that story in a book that argued it was not a medical fluke at all. The book came out in March of 1937. It is called Think and Grow Rich. Its argument is one sentence. Anything you want badly enough, held in your mind clearly enough, with a plan attached and a deadline on it, will eventually arrange itself into reality. That is either the most useful idea in American business writing or the most expensive lie in it. Possibly both. The first printing was 5,000 copies. It sold out in 6 weeks. By the time Hill died in 1970, the book had moved more than 20 million, and the publisher now claims more than 100 million worldwide. Hill's opening move is a man named Edwin Barnes. Barnes was real. No money, no technical training, no connections. In 1905, he rode a freight train into New Jersey, walked into Thomas Edison's laboratory looking like a drifter, and told the most famous inventor alive he had come to go into business with him. Not to work for him. With him. Edison's staff laughed. Edison hired him to sweep floors, and Barnes took it. He swept for years. Then, Edison finished a machine that recorded the human voice onto a wax cylinder so an executive could dictate letters instead of writing them. Edison's own sales force looked at it and refused to touch it. They said nobody would buy it. Barnes said he would. He got it, and he sold so many that Edison handed him exclusive rights to distribute it nationwide. Barnes became genuinely wealthy. He ran Edison's dictating machine operation out of Chicago for decades, and the two were still associates when Edison died in 1931. Hill's point is not that Barnes worked hard. Plenty of people swept those floors. It is that he arrived with one specific outcome in his head, refused every substitute, and waited in the building until that exact door opened. Hill's exercise for this is the most concrete thing in the entire book. Decide the exact amount of money you want. Not a lot. A number. Decide exactly what you will give in return for it, because nobody gets paid for wanting. Set a date. Write a plan and start on it immediately whether you feel ready or not. Put all of that on a single sheet of paper. Then read it out loud twice a day, morning and night, and see yourself already holding it. That is the whole method. Most people who quote this book have never once done that. And it takes 4 minutes. The second thing Hill will not shut up about is what happens right before people quit. He tells a story about a man named Darby, whose uncle went out during the Colorado Gold Rush, staked a claim, hit a real vein, and shipped ore back east to pay off his equipment. Then the vein stopped. Just ended. They drilled and hit nothing, and eventually they gave up and sold the machinery to a junk dealer for a few $100s. The junk dealer did one thing they had not done. He hired a mining engineer to look at the site. The engineer took some measurements and told him the vein had not ended. It had shifted, and it picked up again about 3 feet from where those men had stopped drilling. The junk man made millions off that hole. You should know that nobody has ever verified this story outside of Hill telling it, but he uses it to make a claim that is hard to argue with. Most failure is not dramatic. It is quiet, and it happens a few feet short, and the person who quits never finds out how close they were. Then, Hill adds the piece people skip. Persistence alone is just stubbornness. You also need other people's brains. He calls it the mastermind. 2 or more people working in genuine harmony toward one aim, where the group ends up smarter than anyone in it. And the best illustration is something that actually happened in a Michigan courtroom in 1919. Henry Ford was suing the Chicago Tribune for libel. The paper had essentially called him an ignorant man. So, the Tribune's lawyers put Ford on the stand and quizzed him like a schoolboy on American history, and he flubbed it badly in public for days. Finally, they pushed him too far. Ford said, more or less, that he had a row of buttons on his desk and that he could press one and bring in a man who could answer any question they wanted to ask. So why on earth would he clutter his head with the answers himself? He won the case. The jury awarded him 6 cents. Ford was not smart the way his lawyers were smart. He was smart about what he did not need to carry. Now the strange part of the book, which is also the part that tells you the most about the man who wrote it. Hill believed you could program yourself. He called it autosuggestion. Say the thing out loud with feeling over and over until your subconscious stops treating it as a wish and starts treating it as a fact you are merely late in collecting. Emotion is the whole trick. He is explicit that a bored recitation does nothing, which is exactly what he did to Blair. He installed a belief in a child before the child was old enough to check it against reality. Then there is chapter 11, and if you only ever read one page of this book, read that one, because nobody in 1937 was writing this. Hill argues that sexual energy is the strongest drive a human has, and that highly successful people are almost always highly sexed people who have learned to redirect that energy into work instead of spending it. He says this is why very few men accomplish anything significant before 40, not because they lack ability, but because they have been burning the fuel somewhere else for 20 years. He is not telling you to be a monk. He is telling you the drive itself is the raw material, and most people never notice they are running an engine on it. And then it goes fully off the rails, in the best way. Hill describes holding meetings in his own head. Every night before sleep, he would convene an imaginary council of 9 men he admired. Lincoln, Napoleon, Emerson, Edison. He would give them roles, ask them questions, and listen to what they said back. He writes that after a while these figures became so vivid that it genuinely frightened him, and he stopped for a period because he was no longer certain they were imaginary. You can call that madness. You can also notice that every founder who says he asks himself what a mentor would do in this situation is running a smaller version of the same program. The man was not describing a supernatural power. He was describing the fact that your brain will answer questions you ask it seriously, and almost nobody asks it anything. Here's the part the audiobook narrator does not tell you. The book's entire authority rests on one claim. Hill said that in 1908 he sat down with Andrew Carnegie, the richest man in the world, and Carnegie handed him a 20-year assignment. Go interview the most successful men in America and reduce their methods to a formula ordinary people can use. Carnegie's biographer, the historian David Nassau, went looking. He said he found no evidence of any sort that the 2 men ever met, and no evidence that the book of their supposed conversations was authentic. Hill also did not start telling this story publicly until after Carnegie died in 1919, when nobody could be asked about it. We do know what Hill was actually doing in 1908 because there are court records. He was in Mobile, Alabama, running a company called Acre Hill Lumber. In October of 1908, a Florida newspaper reported the company was facing bankruptcy proceedings and mail fraud charges for buying lumber on credit from out of state, selling it below cost, and never paying anyone back. That same year, his wife filed for divorce. He was not in a mansion on Fifth Avenue receiving a mission. He was leaving town. Not long after, he stopped introducing himself as Oliver, his actual first name, and started using his middle name instead. By 1936, he was broke again and newly divorced. At a lecture, he announced from the stage that he was looking for his dream woman. A woman in the audience named Rosa Lee Beeland introduced herself afterward, and he proposed the next day. They had nowhere to live, so the 2 of them moved in with Blair and his wife Vera in New York. Within months, Hill had bullied Vera so relentlessly that she left and went back to West Virginia. Blair followed her, and on his way out the door, the boy who had been born with no ears lent his father the money to keep working on the book. That book is Think and Grow Rich. Blair's story is in it. It sold in the millions. Hill got rich briefly. Then Rosa Lee, who had done a great deal of the actual writing, divorced him around 1940, and walked away with most of the royalties. And he was poor again. She also never renewed the copyright, which is the only reason you can download the thing free today. So, what do you do with a book like this? You separate the machine from the mechanic. Write the number down. Put a date on it. Say what you will trade for it. Do not quit at the point where quitting feels reasonable, because that point arrives for everyone, and it arrives early. Get around people who know what you do not. All of that survives, and most of it is now repeated by people who have never heard of Hill. The magic does not. Thinking about money has never once produced money. Hill knew it, which is why he spent 40 years selling the thinking instead. And Blair grew up, went into business, did well, and became the kind of man his community relied on. He got there with a hearing device that finally worked and a father who lied to him about his ears until the lie stopped mattering, which is the honest version of the whole book. Hill could not make himself rich by believing. He could only make other people believe. He told a story about a life he had not lived, told it with total conviction for 30 years, and the story outlived every fact that contradicted it. That is not evidence that thoughts become things. It is evidence that a story told confidently enough will outrun the facts for about a century.